as soon as it comes up.
Alrighty then. So yeah, you had a 2 weeks where I want to say, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you enjoy the play?
Yeah, man, it was rough. It was rough. I got some new ones coming up.
As Hyman Roth said, this is the business we've chosen.
Well, I'm looking at a gray screen. Should I be concerned?
Well,
There we go.
there we go. We got it? So,
Yeah, we got good audio.
I ordered a dress shirt from Paul Frederick, the people famous for advertising in airline magazines. They had a big sale.
Yeah.
I got exactly this Pima cotton Oxford cloth shirt for $25.99, and they delivered it to my home in 3 days
Well.
in exact sleeve sizes.
Okay, you're sharing your shopping tips with everyone on Facebook.
Well,
right
I don't
now.
mind.
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
This is the sound check for the AM Exiles
Oh, the
podcast.
sound is fine. Let's get on with the program.
Well, let us begin. Let me get a cup of coffee here. You can do a big intro for us?
Yes,
All right.
live from La Divina, best coffee in town. We are here with the
Bigger intro. Got to be bigger.
live
That's
from La Divina.
Do that one. It's 8 o'clock now, so do that one.
How's that one?
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning in. I'm going to take this earplug out because I'm getting a delay, and that's just going to mess with my head.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you got them demons in your head.
All right, our first guest on the podcast this morning is someone whose hair game is right up to speed with mine.
Oh, already we're going there. Okay. All right.
Attorney at law John McLinden joins us to talk about, a lot of matters going on in town right now. John has been affiliated with two rather high-profile stories in the news here recently. And, John, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with the.
You go ahead. I'm going to reframe that shot. Just a
Yeah,
little
you
bit,
got
okay?
to be careful. Don't knock us off the air.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about the Matthew Knockan case. I don't think the verdict, and of course Matthew Knockan was charged in the death of Max Gruver with negligent homicide. I don't think anybody expected that verdict. I would assume you're appealing.
We're absolutely appealing. And actually, if you read The Advocate, most people would expect a guilty verdict. But if you sat through the trial, I certainly expected a not guilty verdict. So a lot of people have called me, said that they thought it was a fair verdict. And I said, yeah, but you didn't sit through the trial. I thought the evidence was overwhelmingly in our favor. Thought there was plenty of reasonable doubt, which is what the burden is in a criminal case. And I was really in shock for probably 2 weeks after the verdict. It was tough. It was a tough loss.
Your reaction after the verdict on television, that was it was unexpected. And I was like, this guy's feeling it. He's really feeling it.
Yeah, I blurted out that I'm probably going to quit practicing law. I probably shouldn't have said that, but I really felt it. I'll tell you this, and I've told this to a lot of people. I've lost many jury trials that I should have lost. But you go in, and for one reason or other, you have to try the case, and you fight hard, and you lose, and you're like, you know what? The system worked. I fought hard. I gave my client a good defense, but he was found guilty. I never ever got the feeling that I was going to lose this case ever. I just thought the evidence went very well in our favor. I thought there was a lot of reasonable doubt. We got some great testimony from the government witnesses, and I just was shocked, absolutely shocked.
How much jury selection, when you only have 6 people in the box, how much jury selection does either side get to do?
It was pretty fair, and I tried to hit on the most important topics. One was fraternities. How do you feel about fraternities and sororities? Alcohol. We asked a lot of personal questions, Do you or anyone in your family has a problem with alcohol? And they were very open. The jurors were very open. We told them they didn't have to answer out loud. We could approach a bench and talk about it, but everyone was very open. But the point I tried to hit on the most is the sympathy. And in fact, when I was picking the jury out, I pointed to Mr. and Mrs. Gruver, who were sitting on the front row, and my voice actually cracked. I got emotional because it's a tough case. I said to the jurors, this is Mr. and Mrs. Gruver. They're going to be sitting there every day. And there's going to be a lot of tears in this trial. And I want to know if the state does not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, can you walk out here in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gruver and vote not guilty? And I went juror to juror to juror individually, and they all assured me, yes, sympathy would not play a part. We would do it on the evidence alone. I thought I covered that pretty well. Maybe I didn't. Maybe the sympathy factor overcame them during the trial.
I mean, I don't know how, when you have a state legislator trying to name a law after Max Gruver and successfully doing so the year before you come to trial, in the state capitol where that law was written and was covered on the nightly news and in the newspaper for 5, 6, 7, 10 days. I don't know how you can get an untainted jury in East Baton Rouge Parish.
Well, we asked that. We really pushed hard on that, and most people said, yeah, I know something about the case, but not that much.
Oh, come on. I would have struck somebody for lying on the face if they said, I know something about it, but not that much.
You know, you do have to worry about maybe what we call a stealth juror, where he says, yeah, I don't really know much about it, but he knows everything about it, and he's out there to get them.
Yeah.
But we sit there, and during voir dire, we ask them, you know, what have you read about it? What have you heard about it? Have you formed any opinions? And all of them are like, yeah, we know something about it, but not that much. You know, the truth is, a lot of people don't read the paper.
No.
They really don't. And
This
now
is
they
true.
watch TV, but I thought
TV, you get 3 minutes of the story.
that's right. That's right. But I really did feel like that they were telling the truth. Maybe they fooled me, but
Did you put your guy on the stand?
no. You almost never put your client on the stand. It wasn't unique to this case. I've probably put my client on the stand in my career twice. You just don't do it. You know. And I'll tell you that, I think jurors respect that. You know, you go through that in voir dire. You say, you know, we don't have to put on any witnesses. We don't have to put on any evidence at all. And everyone says, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. In fact, I find that if you put your client or any witnesses on the stand for the defense, all of a sudden the jury starts to kind of shift the burden to you. Start saying, well, wait a second. You got problems with your case. So my goal is to not put any witnesses on. I don't like to put witnesses on because it really keeps the burden of proof on the government. That's my own personal philosophy. Now, I did call 2 witnesses. I called Max's roommate, who gave us very favorable testimony. That unfortunately, Max, and I asked him, I said, you lived with Max for 28 days. And I asked him, how many days was he sober? And he said 5.
5 of 28.
5 of 28 days he was sober, and he said it got so bad that this young man's name was Patrick. Patrick called his mom and dad and said, I don't know what to do about my roommate. You know? So when you got testimony like that, testimony from the lady from the Dean of Students at LSU said she interviewed Matthew. She didn't really like Matthew, but she interviewed about 20 other boys. She told the jury those other boys threw Matthew under the bus. I mean, there was all kind of testimony like that where I thought if the jury hears that, I mean, they were going to acquit him.
See, that's interesting because Max was, you know, supposedly the victim because he was not popular, because Matthew didn't like him, and now we find out that Matthew himself was not liked all that much
That's
by
right.
his brothers.
Yeah, and I think that kind of played into it is Matthew Noncan was not the most popular guy in the fraternity. He was kind of, people call him like a drill sergeant, a stickler for the rules, and he was always getting on people. So for guys who remember Animal House, he might have been like the Niedermeyer guy. Remember, he was he was the stickler. He wanted everything done right. So I think probably what happened is when things went bad, and the cops started interviewing, you know, who did this, who's at fault. People said Noncan.
Well, a lot of people wanted to make a deal.
Yeah, several of those guys got deals. That's
Now,
right.
if we can go sidebar for just a second, 2 of those guys
Right.
who cooperated and basically, you know, helped them build the case against Noncan, the judge gave them, what, 90 days?
No, 30 days.
30
He
days?
maxed them out at 30 days.
Was that the
Wow.
deal, or did they think they were going to walk?
I think they were under the impression they were going to get probation.
Uh-huh.
And the judge said, I'm giving you 30 days. I wish I could give you more. So my only...
That's going to hurt the prosecution in the future with future deals, I would think,
Yes.
if it goes to this judge's
Yeah.
court.
You know, my only hope for sentencing, I've prepared my client, said, be prepared. He might max you out at 5 years. But my only hope is that Judge Higginbotham heard all the evidence. And he's a good judge. And I think he might say, you know, based on what I've heard, Matthew wasn't any worse than the two guys who got 30 days. So I'm hoping he'll factor that into his sentencing.
But, you know, this is a young man who's, 21, 22 years old.
Right.
A felony conviction at 22 is not a good thing.
No, it's terrible.
You lose your
it's-
right to vote, at least
Yeah.
for a little while.
Right.
You can't go out and
Can't
hunt.
have a gun.
Yeah. I mean, you're
job
barred
applications,
from certain
grad school,
licenses. Yeah.
Anything that's going to come back to haunt him forever.
I want to forward you a question that a person asked me just last night when I told them you were going to be on the podcast. Was this case about judging Matthew Nakan, or was it a judgment of Greek life in general?
That's a great question. It was supposed to be about were the actions of Matthew Nakan reasonable, or were they criminally negligent? I think the Greek system maybe was caught up in that. It's hard to separate the two. So here, I've been telling everybody this. Here's the best example of criminal negligence. If Bill, I say, hey man, get in my car a minute, let's go drag racing, and I get on the interstate, I'm going 100 miles an hour, I'm passing on the shoulder, I flip the car, you die, I live. Okay, I didn't intend to kill you, but my conduct was so grossly negligent that I'm criminally responsible. Regular negligence is I look down at my phone and a text message, I cause a wreck and I kill you. I wouldn't be charged with anything there. But criminal negligence is conduct that's really bad, let's put it that way. So what they said was Matthew's conduct was really, really bad. Not just regular negligence, criminal negligence.
You know, there's a lot of things that are tugging at my brainstem with all of this right now. First and foremost, if you're going to assign negligence, I think you assign it to the person who took an obviously inebriated person and put them on the couch and put them in such a position as to where they would choke to death on their own aspirations, on their own vomitus. Now, if that was Matthew, you might be able to ascribe that. Also, Gruver was not the only pledge that was drinking that night.
Yeah.
The rest of them walked away.
Yeah, so, and that, again, more evidence I thought was favorable to us. There were probably 20 pledges up there. No one else even got sick. And what every boy that testified said, I fake drank it. I put my tongue in the bottle. I spit it out. Or I took a couple of swigs, and after the first two, I quit. And, in fact, the boy standing next to Max turned to him. He told the jury this. He turned to him and he said, Max, you need to quit drinking. Put your tongue in the bottle like me. The other thing is that when Max showed up, he had already been smoking marijuana. So he was stoned when he showed up, which impairs your judgment. Got all that evidence in. So now you see why I was so shocked at that jury verdict.
Well, I don't want to say this because it's not for me to say, but I will say that there are some people that may feel that this train was on the track because we needed a bad guy in this, and we had one.
That's what I've been hearing from everybody, is that regardless of the evidence, you have and poor Max, I don't mean in any way to talk badly about him or his family, but he's 18 years old. Imagine you send your kid off to college at LSU, and 28 days later he's dead.
Okay, I get this, but nobody ever critically questioned the parents. And I'm talking specifically at the legislature, or in the run-up to this trial. If my roommate at college at LSU, because I came 1,000 miles to go to LSU, if my roommate had called my father and said he's drinking every night, he's out of control, I'm worried my father would have gotten on the next plane, would have had me by the collar, and said, "You're going home." Well, they got that call. Why didn't they do that?
No. The roommate, Patrick, called his own mom and dad.
Oh, okay.
He didn't call the Groovers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But along those lines, Bill, you're right. And nobody wants to ask the Groovers that because you just can't. You just can't ask that question.
Well, it's
but
like
you
the
want
stripper bill in the legislature. You got to vote for it, or people are going to wonder, why you're not voting for the stripper bill.
You do have to wonder: did the Groovers know that Max was out of control? And no one wants to ask. I don't want to ask that question. Nobody does.
Does anybody know whether either of them had a problem with alcohol in college?
I have no idea. I don't know. It's just so tragic. It's really just terrible for the Groovers, but also for the Nakans. During voir dire, one of the girls, she made it on the jury as an alternate. She said she volunteered this. She goes, "Let's don't forget, there's two sets of parents here," and she was right. And it's just so bad for the Nakans. And
I'm reminded of when Ben Wynn died of alcohol poisoning many years. Was it 89, something
Yeah,
like
it's been
that?
a while.
But they needed a bad guy there, so a
Right.
bartender went down.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what happens. Like, somebody's got to be, we got to have somebody.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I really thought the bad guy here was the fraternity. And because, Bill, you mentioned this earlier, what happened was, so they put Max on the couch at night. And I think those boys did a good job. Matthew had nothing to do with that. No one thought Max was in trouble. That evidence was overwhelming. No one thought he was in trouble. They just thought he was drunk. They put him on the couch, propped him up, and everybody went home. And a few boys sat up and watched him. But about the next morning, about 8:30, 9 o'clock, they noticed he didn't look too good. And those poor kids waited like 2 hours to take him to the hospital. They have no house mother there. They have no, you see these placards in these hotel lobbies, what to do in case of an emergency.
Nothing.
Every dorm has a resident advisor.
Oh, yeah.
Every dorm. These kids fumbled around for 2 hours. They didn't know what to do.
Well, and there's always that, I don't want to be the guy that loads them into my car and drives them to the emergency room, and they laugh at me and say, he's just drunk.
And one boy said, well, we didn't want to call an ambulance because we knew we'd get in trouble with LSU if an ambulance showed up at our fraternity.
Yeah, it's...
So it was just a bunch of bad things
Well,
that happened.
sometimes there are just accidents when you've got young, immature minds
That's
at
right.
work.
And
It just,
by no means am I blaming those boys.
No.
I do blame the fraternity. And I blame LSU, quite honestly.
A series of unfortunate events.
yeah. Let's move on now.
All right.
Okay.
Let's move on to Blaine Salamone and his agreement with the police department. I heard you say on television that you're confident you would have won the civil service appeal.
Yes.
So to spare everybody, in the words of pretty much all concerned, going through this and going to district court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, he was allowed to resign. His firing was rescinded. Now, after that, something happened that, quite frankly, surprised me. The great big apology for Blaine Salamone's very existence from the current chief of police, who was not even on the force when the incidents in question happened. Now, I assume you were part of the negotiation for this settlement. Was that part of the deal?
I tell you, it was, and I was coming off the Matthew Knockhand, but I was still emotionally drained, and that was another kick in the stomach. So just to give you a little background on it, we've been working on this for 6-8 months, and the idea was that the chief would undo his decision to fire Blaine, and after he reversed his termination, we would then resign. Mm-hmm. And the idea was, okay, closure of this, peace for the city, this is going to be great for everybody. And unfortunately, I guess maybe I got hoodwinked on this one. They said, we're going to have a press conference. I was like, yeah, that's fine. And I have emails between me and the lawyers for the chief saying, yeah, let's just, maybe we could even do a joint statement at one point. Mm-hmm. We're going to do that. And then the chief and his lawyer just went on and lambasted us. I didn't even go to the press conference. I was in my office watching it, and when it started, and it started to get worse and worse, I was like, what is going on here? I mean, total ambush. Total ambush. You know what's so hypocritical about the chief is he says that, okay, let's put this on a timeline. He fires Blaine. Mm-hmm. Then he does this thorough investigation, finds all these supposedly terrible things, so bad that this man should never have been a cop, right? And then he says, oh, but you know what, in spite of all that, I'm going to undo my firing and I'm going to let you resign. Okay, well, Chief, if he's such a bad guy, why didn't you go to trial and get that termination on the books?
If he never should have been a cop in the first place, blah, blah, blah.
Why'd you let him resign? Why didn't you go to the trial and force the issue and make him have a termination on his record? The reason he didn't go to trial is because he was going to lose. We were going to crush him at that hearing, and he knew that. And so what he did, it was a very clever strategy on his part, is that he allowed him to resign, and then he just used his press conference as his opening and closing statement.
But to what end? I don't see how the police department benefits from that. And from what I hear from a lot of officers, they don't feel like they benefited from that.
It offended a lot of officers. It offended a lot of former chiefs of this police department. And I'll tell you what, and I don't think the mayor thought this all the way through. The move for St. George to break away, I think they picked up a lot of traction. When they saw that chief do that, they're like, okay, how do I get on breaking away from this city?
Well, and if I'm the attorney for the civil suit, I'm thinking this guy just admitted guilt on behalf of other people because he wasn't involved.
Unbelievable.
And it's payday for me.
I almost feel like the chief is in cahoots with the plaintiff lawyers. That's how bad it was. I'm sitting there watching this. I'm like, okay, wait, was he coached by the lawyers for the Sterling family? Because he basically, you're right, Bill, he just gave them, he's their number one witness.
Well,
I saw the lawyers on the news last night. They don't come across well on the news. They come across as pretty much all, we're going to get a check one way or the other. We want a check, big fat
and
check.
that is their job.
Well, but I think Kevin's right. Is that even though they might not use those words, I noticed several times they keep saying the city needs to settle. The city needs to settle. The city needs to settle. I think they're a little worried about going to trial.
Now, you probably know Leo Hamilton from Brazil, Saxon
Right,
Wilson. He
right.
represents BSW represents a lot of the city parish entities,
Right.
including the police department. Leo is an old and dear friend, and Leo is a very good lawyer. And I thought he handled it very, very well in explaining why a settlement was being offered. Now, they zoomed in on the chief. I couldn't see Leo's face when the chief was saying, I apologize, we were wrong, we should have never had this guy. That's got to give an attorney apoplexy.
The lawyers for the Sterling family were jumping for joy. The lawyers for the city parish must have been having a heart attack. Like, what is going on? I'll tell you this. One of the parish attorneys texted me during that and said, do you know about this? What's going on? I was embarrassed. I called him and said, yeah, this is a shock to me. It was an ambush, total ambush.
It was really unexpected. We've talked to the
Oh,
chief
my
several
God.
times, and I was like, is this the same guy? I mean,
It was totally unexpected. And I just got to tell you, even if the chief believes that the shooting was unjustified, which, by the way, no expert witness has ever said it, we have an adversarial system, and we have a trial coming up. You're not supposed to comment on that. You're really not. And you're on Baton Rouge's side. He just kind of stabbed his team in the back.
mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't understand what would be the possible upside of going through all of that. You're the one who
Going through what?
Going through talking about what a bad guy Blaine Salamone was and how stupid those who employed him and supervised him in the past had been. There's no upside to that for the police department, for the city.
Well, I will tell you what I've been told, and this is probably not politically correct to say this, but I've been told that the chief did that to appease the African American community.
Well, that was pretty much blatantly on its
Okay.
face.
It's like, well, I have to do this to appease the African American community, or else they'll riot or do whatever. And so he felt like he really had to attack Blaine. Somebody else told me that. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I was told that.
The other thing is, I got the impression, I thought the press conference was supposed to be the end piece to this. And yet, as recently as last night on the news, we're hearing about Blaine Salamone and an incident from 2014. They feel like they've now got to reinforce that message that he was not a good cop.
I think they need a gag order.
He was a bad cop.
They really need a gag order, because it's getting now where the plaintiff lawyers are having a press conference after almost every court date. They're coming out with a press conference. They should really get a gag order in place.
Where's the liability? Now, again, I don't know what documents you have seen or haven't seen. I haven't seen any, but the chief made it very plain during his part of the press conference.
Good morning, y'all. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. He made it very, very plain that Blaine Salamone, as he put it, lied on his application
Not
about
true.
an arrest.
That's not true.
And your partner on the news was saying there was never an arrest. He was questioned and released.
Right.
I mean, that is not a good thing. Is there some liability now because of putting that out in the public?
I talked to Blaine yesterday, and he said some people had come up and said you should sue the chief. We're not going to go there. They go low, we're going to go high. We're always going to take the high road. But for the chief of police to say that is just shocking. If he doesn't know the difference between an interview and arrest, that is just shocking. Blaine was interviewed about an incident with his girlfriend. The girlfriend said, look, this is a misunderstanding. Let's all go home. They went home. No one was arrested. No one was given a ticket, anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the chief said that he was arrested. It's crazy.
Well, and again, after the press conference, Kevin and I were talking about it. I said, I think the chief was really worried about inflaming some tender emotions in 70805. And so he was trying to calm things down or keep them calm. I understand that, but I also think that sometimes when you are in a position of importance, there's a bridge too far, and a lot of people feel that the chief crossed it.
He really did. I was thinking back to the press conference the chief had the day after he fired Blaine. So we had a hearing. It was late at night hearing, and the next morning he had a press conference to announce his firing. Actually, I thought the chief did a pretty good job in that press conference. He started off by saying, if a police officer asks you something, you should obey the officer. Show him your hands. Put your hands on the car. Comply.
Yeah.
I thought the chief did a good job there. And all of a sudden, I don't know, he just, for whatever reason, that wasn't the message the other day. It was that Blaine's the worst officer that's ever lived, which is totally unsupported.
There was also something missing from that press conference by the chief. No mention of 3 law enforcement officers who died. One that is in a living death right now in a hospital in Texas as a result of the shooting. And the public getting flamed up about it.
Right.
I mean, make no mistake, that guy came down here from, what was it, Kansas?
Yeah, St. Louis.
St. Louis. But the guy came down here and shot 6 law enforcement officers and killed 3.
Right.
And the Alton Sterling case was the reason why.
Well,
and no word about no thought to the families of those officers.
Thank God, because he would have blamed that on Blaine Salamone as well.
Yeah,
he did say.
I'll tell you what. Go ahead.
He did say, but for Blaine Salamone answering that call, Alton Sterling would be alive, and that's a big stretch.
That's a huge leap, I think.
I'll tell you what really offended me the most is what doesn't get overlooked by me, but by the chief. Let's go back to that night. Alton Sterling is high on cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big guy with a gun. He's pulling, while they're wrestling, he's pulling a gun out of his pocket. And Blaine yells, he's going in his pocket, he's got a gun. And as he's pulling out, Blaine uses justifiable force and shoots him and kills him, okay? And the chief apologized to the Sterling family. I just found that offensive. Look, we're all sad that anybody died. I don't care how bad a guy somebody is. He lost his life, and that's not good. But you apologize for Blaine doing his job on a guy who's hopped up on drugs, pulling a gun out of his pocket?
Well, here's what
it's quite possible, no matter what officers responded, if Mr. Sterling's actions had been exactly the same, no matter what officers responded, it might have been the same outcome.
It absolutely would. In fact, if an officer did not shoot him, that officer would get in trouble. Based on what is shown in that video, that officer would get in trouble. And I'll go a step further. Blaine and Howie were both justified in shooting probably about 5 or 6 seconds earlier. But Blaine tried to grab his hand. He tried to grab Alton's hand. The first time he went for the gun, Blaine tried to grab his hand to stop it. That's not what you're supposed to do is shoot him.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to unload your gun. That's what you're trained to do. Now, if you don't like the training, if you're listening to this, you don't like the training, then go to the Congress or go to the legislature and ask them to change the law on that. But that's what they're trained to do.
Well, and what is interesting is what everybody seems to have keyed in on was not Alton Sterling's gun, or not that the police were called, but that they used bad language.
Yeah.
That they called him names. They pointed their guns at him. Oh, my God.
Yeah, right.
Are we this stupid as a society where we buy this?
Right. Yeah.
Are we that dumb?
On our radio show, we actually had a caller suggest that, they didn't need to shoot him before he could even get the gun out of his pants. It's like they were supposed to let him get the gun out of his pants?
So
seriously?
Obviously, I've talked to a lot of police officers over the last 2 years, and part of the problem is what we see in the movies is that people say, well, you could have shot him in the leg to disable him, or you could have done that. That happens in the movies.
Training.
That's not what you're trained to do.
Center body mass.
You're trained to shoot, and you're supposed to empty your gun. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, they're going to ask you, why did you stop shooting? That's the training. And if you don't like the training, then go get the training changed. But if you change the training, you're going to have cops getting shot. If they have to wait for the guy to point the gun at them, that's not the law in this country. That's been supported by the United States Supreme Court. You don't have to wait. If they're reaching, and it actually even turns out even not to be a gun, if they're reaching and that officer has a reasonable belief that that's a weapon, you are justified in shooting.
Yeah, well, and again, everybody can judge something from a distance of 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 weeks that unfolded in about 8 or 9 seconds.
That's right.
And I really don't know Blaine Salamone. I don't know if he had a temper problem. I don't know any of that. But what I do know is those officers were dispatched to a call with not only a man with a gun, but a man with a gun who had pointed it at somebody.
Right.
So they roll up. They know that this is the guy because it matches the description. They ask him to comply with their instructions. All hell breaks loose. You can see the butt end of a revolver in his pants pocket.
Yeah.
His hand is moving that way. Now, we all know how this is going to end.
Right.
But they never talked about that. They talked about, they used bad language. I don't like bad language. But you know what? A lot of cops use bad language to scare the suspect into stopping what they're doing. They have those guns so that they can point them at people when they feel it's necessary. Oh, he pointed his gun at his head.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, are we that stupid as a society to think that this is a criminal act on behalf of an officer doing his job? I say it's not.
So, I've tried to come up with some analogies. I'll give you maybe this analogy will work. If Kevin, you go in for a colonoscopy and the doctor perforates your colon and you have to have emergency surgery, that's not medical malpractice. That is not. And a lot of people happen to a family member of mine. I'm like, and I'm a lawyer. I'm like, you're kidding me. People don't know that. Mm-hmm. So let's move to this. People see this and they can't believe that that's what the law is, but that's what the law is. So you said, are they ignorant? Are they stupid? Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe even before this case, I didn't understand all the nuances of police use of force and reasonable use of force. But that's what the law is. The Supreme Court has said that you're not to use 20/20 hindsight in judging these cops. They're making decisions in a tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving situation. And we don't go back and use 20/20 and say, you should have done this, you should have done this, you should have done this. As long as they follow their training, then it's a legitimate shoot.
Am I correct, before we wrap this up, and thank you for your time, am I correct in recalling that not one authoritative investigative body outside of the two that carried it out, which is the FBI and the Attorney General's office with the Louisiana State Police, has found issue with either of their investigations?
No, everybody who's looked at it, the federal government, the state government, the expert witnesses, and we talked to several, have all said it's a justified shooting. It was a justified shooting. And I will be very surprised to see the plaintiff lawyers in this case, what kind of expert are they using? He's going to be, he'll be in the minority for sure, because I haven't met anybody that said that this was what they call a bad shoot. This was a legitimate use of force.
John McLinden, attorney at law.
I'd just like to ask you one more question.
Sure.
What do you think are the odds that the city will decide to settle this thing out of court?
I think they'll pay. I think they'll eventually pay. And again, unfortunately, it's fallen on racial lines. So it's the Metro Council has to approve it, and it's going to go straight down racial lines.
I'm thinking, given the way we handled BLM, that probably it's going to be an out-of-court settlement.
It probably will. Hopefully, they'll dig in and just pay a nominal amount to make it go away. I hope my taxpayer dollars don't go to pay for that. That would really offend me.
Well,
really
for right now, in absence of any other evidence, I'm going to disagree with both of you. I'm thinking the council's going to dig in and say not one penny, going to force them to go to trial.
And it'd be great. And I'm going to tell you something. The jury's not going to give these people a lot of money. They're just not going to.
No,
it's
not at all.
Legally, it's just not going to happen.
Hello,
Hi,
Melinda. How are you?
Good to see you.
So it'll be interesting to watch.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
As
thanks,
always,
John
we
McLinden.
appreciate you.
Yep. All right. Anytime, y'all.
All right, former Chief of Police Pat Englade is coming to join us. By the way, if you didn't see the late news last night, unfortunately, the death toll in El Paso now is 22.
And the death toll is up in Chicago over the weekend as well. Did you see that?
No, I missed that
Yeah,
one.
the not the death toll. The death toll still at 7, but the number of shootings recorded over the weekend in Chicago has been adjusted upward from 50-something to 74.
Yes.
74 people shot in one weekend in a city with the toughest gun control laws in the nation.
And probably the toughest gangs in the nation as well. And
Good to see you.
And I will tell you, they're doing a lot of depolicing in Chicago. I grew up there. I remember when the crime was basically 3 what they call wards in Chicago. It was 3 wards, and as long as it didn't come out, as long as it stayed there was not a lot of police cracking down. Well, years ago, the community asked the police to crack down. They went in, and then they didn't like the fact that people with guns were getting shot by cops, and cops were making arrests where people resisted and they got bruised up. So, for all intents and purposes, the cops have walked away from, I can't remember which district it is. And it's the Wentworth district, infamous for high crime. And as long as they don't cross border lines, well, the problem is eventually going to take care of itself there.
Man that knows quite a bit about policing, the former police chief and the head of CALEF, the Capital Area Law Enforcement Foundation, Pat Englade, with us. Hi, Pat.
Good morning.
Pat, I want to ask you about CALEF before we get around to being a former police chief. You all did a campaign with a very good friend of mine, and I know of yours, Gil Leachman.
Yes.
Worked with him for many years at the airport. He was the police chief out there, but I knew him from when he was first a new officer. He passed away of a silent heart attack in his sleep, I guess about 3 months ago. And you did a vest campaign with his name on it. Is that going to be ongoing?
That is. Well, we're going to do that on a yearly basis to honor him. I got with his family, Roxanne and family, and I said, let's do something special to honor a special guy, because Gil was a special guy. Mm-hmm. He was always involved in the community, whatever was going on, and through all this, and especially during the flood, their house was flooded, and they were still out doing what they do in spite of that. So I have a lot of respect for how Gil conducted his life. It's a real loss for the city of Baton Rouge, I'll tell you that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a proper way to honor him every year that we continue the Gil Leachman Memorial Vest Fund. And hopefully when these guys get a vest and it has Gil's name on the inside of it, that will mean something extra to everybody.
Mm-hmm. You know, before he became an airport police firefighter, because they're both out there,
right?
He was a sheriff's deputy. And there was a great story. He was coming home. He was off shift. And he saw 3 guys skulking around the backyard, and he decided to go investigate. And as I remember it, he took all 3 of them down without firing a shot, cuffed them up, and handed them over to people that were on duty in the middle of the night after his shift by himself. And he probably did it with a smile, because that was the kind of guy he was.
That's exactly how he was.
You know, he was not a cussing, fussing kind of cop.
No.
He was very firm, but he always had a smile on his face.
He did. I think even when he was mad at people, he had a smile on his face.
Yeah, you couldn't really.
You could tell.
You couldn't really tell. He actually had to cuff up a member of the news media on 9/13/2001.
Okay.
When they were out at the airport and they were told that they couldn't shoot the security screening, and they decided to do it anyway. And he tapped him on the shoulder. I was standing right beside him. He said, "You need to move that camera." He said, "No, I don't. I'm a member of the news media." Big old grin on his face. Took out his cuffs. Put your hands behind your back. And we walked this member of the news media over to the holding cell they have out there. We let him sit for a couple hours.
A decisive person, wasn't he?
We let him sit for a couple hours. All right, Chief.
Let him think about his deeds. How is the Angel Vest campaign going?
Good. We're steadily putting vests on officers. We got an event coming up way out of my wheelhouse in September. We're doing a sporting clay event with the David DeLucci Foundation.
Great idea.
David, as you know, David was a Major League Baseball player.
Yep.
From here in Baton Rouge at Catholic High, went to Ole Miss, and then he actually won a World Series. And David got involved a few years ago because he knew how much this meant, and him and his family have a tremendous love for law enforcement. So this will be the second year of Bullseyes and Badges. It's called Bullseyes and Badges 2. And I've got a couple of really good people helping me with this because, like I said, it's out of my wheelhouse. But they put together, it's going to be a fantastic
I love
event.
shooting sporting clays. I do.
Well, you need to come.
Yeah, we used to have a team at Guarantee, as a matter of fact.
It will be fun. There's going to be a lot of food, bourbon. We're going to have a bourbon bar. We're going to have a Beta root beer float place. It's going to be fun, and I hope everybody
Can I
gets
have a bourbon
chance.
float?
Yes, that's all available.
You're going to be around a lot of cops, and you're going to walk to your car with a shotgun. Now, think about this.
Now you have to understand that the Bridgeview Gun Club is directly behind West Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office.
Yes.
So I just want to throw that out there for
So
whatever you want to
be on
think
your
about.
best.
For those of you who are shooters, that is a great venue, by the way. We have 3 here in the Baton Rouge area. There's one way out in Denham Springs, the
Right.
farthest corner, and that's actually an AAU competition site. And I've shot that, and I was like grandma's drawers. That is way too tough. And then there's the Boy Scout reservation up at Avondale, which is really good.
I've heard about
You're
that,
doing
too.
a lot of walking. Bridgeview, an average shooter can score well there, and it's a fun place to shoot clays.
Well, this is going to be. We hope that our mission when we do something is when you leave there, you had a good experience, and you'll tell people, and you'll come back.
And what's the
what
date?
We do. It's September the 13th. It's a Friday morning. Bridgeview Gun Club in West Baton Rouge Parish.
And how much a shooter?
It's $800 a team,
Oh, that's not bad. That's not.
and you know what the money's going for.
Yes.
And that's the best of causes. For those that are uninitiated, explain the difference between the Angel vest and the conventional Kevlar vest.
Well, when we started this, we knew that the vest that the police officers had on July 17th did not work. Mm-hmm. Every one of them had a vest on, and we knew that they didn't. The vest wouldn't hold up to the round. It was
That
being
maniac
shot.
was firing high velocity rounds.
Correct. A rifle round, which is a term most used by people, a rifle round. And so we said, well, we've got a problem here, because as we know, we had Dallas right before Baton Rouge, and it was exactly the same situation. They went, a ex-military guy with a military weapon type and shooting at police officers. So the worst thing that can happen is that police officers go down and this person continues to kill. I think it's only by the grace of God that morning that the SWAT team from BRPD happened to be right down the street because of the Alton Sterling protest, and they were on the scene within seconds, well, not seconds, but minutes of when it happened, and they were able, because he was going back to his car. That's where he was going, and if he went mobile again, there's no telling what
There would have been another crime scene.
So
No doubt.
the long story to that is we wanted to find a vest that would hold up to those kind of rounds. Even if they were hit with a round like that, can they stay in the fight? Could they still go back and continue? And so we did a tremendous amount of research. And we brought Angel Armor, who I didn't know exactly who they were. I was called by an officer in New York who said, you need to talk to these people. They've got a really good product. And so I called, and I actually talked to the owner of the company. He answered the phone, Josh Richardson, who's the owner of Angel Armor, who also owns OtterBox. And so the family mission was to save as many police officers' lives. So they just used what technology and what they did to protect phones into now going in to try to protect law enforcement. And they did a tremendous amount of research. And we actually brought their vest here to Baton Rouge. We did what they call a live fire, where we put that vest, those plates out on the range, and we shot that thing with everything we could throw at it, including the rifle that was used by Long that day. And it held up to everything. So we said we've got a winner here. And so that's the vest. We've tried them all. We've shot them all. We've done all the work that you should be doing, because if it's got the CALEF name on it, I want it to be the very best that we can possibly buy. And could we buy a lot of $400 vests? Absolutely. But I'm not going to put a $400 vest on a police officer.
No,
that's not
get the
going to
good
work
stuff.
for me.
If people are listening right now and they would like to make an online contribution to CALEF, where do they go?
Very easy. CALEF, CALEF.LA. That's it. No org or com. It's CALEF.LA, and there's a number of ways on there that you can contribute. And I'm telling you, it's just like the Gil Leachman thing. The family will give those vests to those officers, and it's an incredible moment. We will, the middle of next week, we're going to present the Zachary Police Department with their vest, and they're going to put together a little where we can come together and bring the families in of those law enforcement. It's a special moment because, we know all well that when they go out that house, you never know if they're going to come back in. And just the thought of knowing that they're protected with something that we think can save their lives means a whole bunch to these families.
And if you don't think it's worth doing, go back. It's still up everywhere. Watch the officers responding in Dayton. This guy has got an AK-style weapon with a 100-round box magazine attached to it. Well, it's a round magazine. And he's firing, and these officers are running toward him.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if they had Angel Armor vests on or not, but would you not
No, they were
rather,
just probably, well, I don't know what kind of
would you
armor they
not
were
rather
wearing.
have your officers wearing that if they're facing a guy with a rifle who is intending on killing as many people as possible?
Well, and that's part of the issue we looked at when we decided this is everyday wear is what it's called.
Yeah.
We do not. Matt Gerald had a gun, a rifle, and another vest in the trunk of his car. Mm-hmm. He did not think about it. He reacted.
He had to jump out?
Just like Dayton did. He jumps out that car and goes to what he needs to do. Right now, they're not going to stop and think about it, and nor do we want them to stop and think about it. We want them to react immediately. And that means they're going to have on the armor they need to protect them when they jump out of that car and not have to think about going to the trunk and maybe somebody dies in that instant. So, yes, that's our goal, is to get these vests that they can wear every day on them.
Now, let's switch gears a little bit. You are a former BRPD chief. I don't know if you were the chief when Blaine Salamone was hired, or if it was Chief Ferries, or if it was Chief LaDuff, or if it was...
No, actually, I think the nepotism goes out the door here, because it was actually Chief White, who was a former state trooper.
Okay, so and he was not chief very long. He was...
No, sir.
No, he wasn't Chief very long.
Yes.
No, but that's, I mean, I've heard nepotism go through this constantly, but the fact is that I'm not sure that Chief White knew who the Salamone family was, to be honest with you. But I called Carl Dabney the other day. I said, Carl, did you hire him? He said, no, sir, I did not. I said, was it Jeff? He said, no, sir, it was Chief White. I said, okay, well, that answers
his name wasn't even going to come up as I was going through him. I was going to skip from LaDuff to Dabney because he was here so briefly.
He also didn't strike me as the kind of guy that would, do you a favor and hire your kid, that sort of thing.
I think he was pretty much by the book.
Yeah.
I mean, state police usually runs that way. I mean, that's the way they typically run. And I would think he did his due diligence on the hiring. I mean, that's, I've made the statement every time somebody asks me, hiring a police officer is the most important thing you will ever do as a police chief, because you're putting a gun in somebody's hands and say you can go kill somebody. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you damn better know who you're going to give a gun to. And I think every chief I know has done their due diligence in that. And hiring anybody that would be less than that, I think, I can't imagine any chief that I know. And I have a very good relationship going all the way back to Wayne Rohilla, who I just saw Sunday, and he and I had an interesting conversation.
How is Chief Rohilla?
Well, he's okay. His wife was in a horrible accident in Colorado. Yes. Mm-hmm. A four-wheel vehicle flipped over. She was severely injured, and she's totally blind now.
Oh.
So she's having to deal with that at this age. So we helped him a lot during that process, and he's so thankful. But Chief Rohilla has always been one of my favorite people.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the chief's responsibility to his men and women, as well as his responsibility to the government and to the political forces that are at play. And you took issue with Chief Paul's apology, and a lot of people have. And would you, as police chief in the same circumstance, if you're trying to settle something that has been, quite frankly, an open wound, would you have crossed that line, or would you have just said, it's over, we're moving forward, thank you very much?
Absolutely. What he did was open up more wounds. I mean, if the purpose here was, let's settle this thing, let's get everybody back together, that we put this behind us now, it's on. When you go and you start, I don't want to use the word pandering, I don't know what the term is here, that you're apologizing to people for something that your officers did in the line of duty, and they continue to do that every day. I think it sends a horrible message to your troops that you need to watch. Those things happen so very seldom. I mean, there's a potential, obviously, every day for it to happen. I mean, there's a confrontation every day in Baton Rouge between a police officer and another individual in the public. So the potential is always there, but you look at the thousands of those cases that are handled every year, and they're handled, without problem, without incident, and that all goes back to training. And I know Blaine Salamone at that point was clocked into his training and what he was supposed to do to survive an incident like that. So I think if you're going to apologize, and I made this statement out loud, if you're going to apologize, you apologize to everybody that suffered from this incident. I don't know if he realizes what that department went through for the 3 years since that incident. And I mean, when you lose those officers like that, and all these guys are out there and they're seeing what happened to their fellow officers, it's a traumatic issue that will never leave these guys' minds. So their mental health after this was very tough to deal with, and they're still trying to get through that process. I saw something on the news the other day. Somebody sent me a picture. It's a video in the city of New York, and I think there's a recent case where they indicted an officer in a shooting incident, and they ended up finding no fault. I think the mayor of New York, I think there's a separate group that actually looks in. I'm not sure what they are, if it's an independent group that looks at police shootings. Mm-hmm. And they found that they felt like he violated protocol, and they were going to dismiss him. Well, it stirred up this huge pot. And there's about a 5-minute video that's really good. It's the head of the union there in New York. And of course, he's just incensed by this. And he instructs the officers that are belong to him and under his union in New York. You get called to a scene, and a guy does not want to cooperate with you, back up, call for a sergeant, and call for an emergency vehicle. Do not encounter him, because you don't know what's going to happen next. If this city's not going to back you trying to do your job, you retreat, call for a supervisor, and then wait and see what happens.
Wow.
That's the city of New York.
We were talking about this earlier. I think that's what's going on in the city of Chicago right now.
I have no doubt.
Does that qualify as
about that.
depolicing in your mind?
Well, I don't know if you call it a de-escalation, which is a big word that everybody throws around now. And, just because you retreat back doesn't mean they will, because there's always a push. Bless you. I have seen things that are just going to go to hell no matter what. And we all know that. We become more violent. We become, yesterday, a police officer gets shot in a domestic issue. Mm-hmm. Worst case scenario for any police officer. They hate domestic cases because the bad in everybody comes out in those things. Mm-hmm. So how do you avoid those kind of situations? You really can't. You've got to be able to police them, and you've got to know that your department, if you do what you're supposed to, is going to back you. And I used to tell police officers all the time, you don't need me when you're right. You need me when you're wrong. Because we're going to have to try to figure out how to get this thing done in a situation.
I wanted to ask you this. We had a couple of nights ago a situation at a domestic, and a police officer wound up taking a bullet or two into the leg. And I don't know how he did this he didn't draw his weapon. And you put 2 bullets in my leg, I'm going to fire back at you. I mean, that's just me.
Maybe he didn't have a good
I'm not a trained police officer.
Now, do you understand, now that you pulled your gun in Baton Rouge, you have stepped up to the next, and you've got a lot of explaining to do under policy of the BRPD now. That is almost a last case effort that you pull that gun out. I grew up in the police department. I did 33 years there. I was there when police were actually allowed to police with professionalism and treating people the way they should, and we controlled situations very well. I mean, you can look back at the number of people that police officers killed here in Baton Rouge, and that number is very insignificant. It's not big. So, if he pulls his gun, he's got a lot of explaining to do why he did that, and that's what scares me, is if you underestimate or you hesitate, do you die because you thought that you may become the next guy that has to go through this? Do I become the next Blaine Salamone if I have to do something?
And that's the question that's being asked a lot. Now, here's the thing that I am having a hard time getting my mind around, and a lot of people go, oh, yeah, that's right, that's right. They talk about de-escalation techniques. Who is it you want to de-escalate? Do you want to de-escalate the person who you are coming to try to take into custody, or do you want to de-escalate your officers? You can't have it both ways. And it's one of those buzz terms that I absolutely hate because it's open for wild interpretation by the agendized and the stupid. I want my officers, if they're responding to a man with a gun, I want them to say, show me your hands, and be very polite the first time, and then after that, it's what they used to call the continuum of force.
Yes.
And that continuum of force, the yelling, the screaming, the drawing your
And
weapon,
it should still be called that.
yeah, is to de-escalate the person you're there to pick up.
Absolutely.
I don't think you should be de-escalating your cops unless their partner sees them breaking the law while they're answering a call.
Let me give you this example, and I tell people this all the time, and it's really no different in policing than it is anything else. You walk into your house and your child's in there and they've done something wrong, and you say something to them and they talk back to you, then it starts escalating and it goes to a point where you would say some things probably you wish you wouldn't have said to your child. So how is that any different in the streets of Baton Rouge? You're trying to control a situation and tell people that you need to listen to me or we're going to move this to the next level. I think that is absolutely an appropriate use of that continuum of force, because I think that's your first thing you do. You try to control that situation, and if you have to say, look here, and you use a few choice words, it gets people's attention. Now it gets you suspended with Baton Rouge Police Department. And I totally, it's not my department to run. It's Chief Paul's department to run. But I look at it as I've been around the department for most of my life, and I understand what it takes for those officers to do their job. And sometimes they've got to do things that they don't like to do. And nobody wants to walk into a situation where they have to potentially shoot somebody. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be in that situation. As much as people say police like to beat up and kill people, no, they do not. They know what's going to happen next, and most of them have the willpower and the professionalism not to do it in the first place.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, here's the whole deal. I don't think that most of the officers at any department wake up every morning and say, I'm going to dog cuss somebody today just because I can.
Absolutely.
I think that in their head, they have seen enough, they have dealt with enough, most of them, to say, if I scream something at this guy right now, he might go ahead and show me his hands so that I don't have to tase him, so I don't have to wrestle with him, so I don't have to hit him with a stick. But I think when you've got a mindset in certain areas that, oh, that officer can't talk to me that way no matter how I talk to him, you are setting up a conflict that is not going to go well. It just isn't.
There is certain segment of people, white, black, you can call them whatever you want, any color out there, that it just has no respect for authority or the police. They didn't have authority when they went to school for the people that taught them. They just don't have any respect for anybody. And they're the ones that are going to try and push that envelope as far as you can push it, and then expect that nothing's going to happen in return. It's just that's the nature of how people have become today. And I know that I talk to these guys almost every day. It has become almost unbearable for them to work under these conditions right now, and not knowing. I mean, you talk about getting up, putting on your equipment, and putting on that vest, and walking out the door and say, God, I hope it's a slow day. I hope we don't have to deal with anything. But if it does, just please, let me come home tonight. Anybody that doesn't think that is if you don't think they think that every morning, then everybody's crazy, because that's exactly how everybody thinks in the morning.
I've got one more question for you. Again, as a former urban police chief, and not too far in the rearview mirror, we finally heard about the FBI warning to metropolitan areas after the Dayton and El Paso shootings, and the Dayton mayor just spelled it out. She was pretty graphic, saying, "Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
Officer, how are you?"
This can happen in any metropolitan area. We've been worried about copycats. Now, I remember during the serial killer in Baton Rouge, you were the chief.
I was.
And one of the things we were worried about was copycats.
Sure.
What do you think our alert level should be in the city of Baton Rouge and cities like Baton Rouge for this
I
kind
think
of
you have to be at the level of expecting at any moment. I do think that local fire and police, EMS train extensively on that now. Almost everybody in this country does that now. You look what happened in Dayton and even in El Paso. I mean, there was an immediate response. They're immediately going in. It was a 6-minute response in El Paso, which is really good.
That's pretty quick.
But, of course, in 6 minutes, you know how many bullets you can throw out of a gun.
Yeah.
You know that. That's just, you can throw a lot of bullets out of a gun. So the best you can hope for is contain that situation as fast as you can. But, I think they do a tremendous – I think everybody here, if they haven't already, should know that the next one can happen here at any moment. You've got 2 major campuses here, LSU and Southern University. They are perfect targets for anything to happen.
You got a crowded downtown area that's like 3
Yep.
streets, just
It's
like
prime
Dayton.
for anybody. I mean, do you know how much damage somebody could do? And like I said, I think the departments have done their due diligence in this, and they've done what they're supposed to be doing to train for it. God, just please don't let it happen here. But if it does, I think, we got some good people in law enforcement. We got some very good officers. There's one sitting right there behind me right now.
I've heard. I've heard rumors.
But, they lead their people the way they would. And if something happens right now, he's going to lead his people the way they should be led.
Well, and I believe
it's
it was one of his that got shot last night. Yeah. Thank God it was only in the leg. Chief Pat Englade, always a pleasure. We're going to have you on a little more often.
Thank you, Bill.
CALEF, Capital Area Law Enforcement, CALF.LA if you want to make a contribution toward Angel Armor vests. And also, if you want to sign up for the Sporting Clays.
Absolutely.
If you've never done it before, it's a lot of fun.
We're about filled on that, though. It's close.
That's good.
It's
You
good.
can always add a second flight.
Don't ever think I'm going to turn down money, Bill.
And by the way, this course in Port Allen, you can shoot it with a 20 gauge, so you don't have to get beaten up with a 12 gauge. First time I shot there, I was nursing my bruises after about the first 50 shells, and a lot of these guys looked at me and they had these little short barrel 20 gauges. And man, you don't need that 12 gauge. I went out and bought myself a 20 gauge right after that one.
You can shoot a 410. I don't really care.
If you're a real good shot, you can shoot
you
a
go.
410.
Well, once again, we appreciate you being with us. We
Sure.
appreciate John McLinden spending some time with us, and we'll be back here at La Divina on Perkins at Acadian, and we hope you'll join us on Friday morning at 8 a.m.
Thanks,
for the
everybody.
podcast. God bless.